Lila's small, bare feet made no sound on the giant, cold floor. The room was bigger than her entire apartment. It was bigger than the whole apartment building. A ceiling so high it looked like the sky was trapped inside. A staircase curled up one wall like a sleeping dragon. She stood just inside the massive front door, dripping rainwater onto the shiny, perfect marble. She tried to make herself smaller to stop the water from her old yellow raincoat from making a puddle, but she was shivering too hard. The man who had let her in was tall. He wore clothes so dark and soft they seemed to drink the light in the room. He wasn't old like a grandpa, but he wasn't young either. His face was handsome, but it was the saddest face Lila had ever seen. His eyes looked like two empty windows. "Wait here, child," he said. His voice was deep and rough, like he hadn't used it in a long time. "Let me get you a towel. You'll catch a cold." He disappeared down a long, dark hallway. Lila was alone. She stared at the furniture. The chairs were made of soft, silvery cloth. She was afraid to sit on them. She knew her wet, dirty coat would stain them forever. Her eyes moved around the silent, giant room. It smelled like old books and expensive soap. There was no sound. No television, no radio, no people talking. Just the sound of the rain lashing against the tall windows and the quiet, steady ticking of a giant clock. Then she saw it. On the far wall, there was a fireplace so big she could stand up inside it. And above the fireplace, in a heavy, shining gold frame, was a picture. It wasn't a painting of a boat or a bowl of fruit. It was a photograph. Lila felt her feet move, one step at a time, pulling her closer. She was so cold, but a strange warmth was coming from the picture. She got closer and her heart stopped. It was Mama. But it couldn't be. This woman in the picture was laughing. Her head was tilted back, and her smile was as bright as the sun. Her hair was long and brown and shiny, flying around her shoulders as if she were dancing. She was wearing a beautiful dress, the color of a happy, bright yellow, and she was standing in a field of green grass and tiny white flowers. This woman was happy. This woman was healthy. Lila's mama, Elena, was sick. She was pale and thin, and her hair was flat and tired. Her mama hadn't smiled, a real smile, in as long as Lila could remember. Her mama lived in a small, dark room and coughed all night. But Lila knew. She would know those eyes anywhere. The small mole just above her lip. It was her mama. "Here, child," the deep voice said. Lila jumped. The sad man, the billionaire, was back. He was holding a fluffy white towel in one hand and a glass of milk in the other. He stopped. He saw what Lila was looking at. He saw her small, pale face staring up at the photograph. Lila turned, her voice a tiny, shaky whisper that cut through the silence of the giant house. "Why? Why do you have a picture of my mama?" The man's face went completely, horribly white. The fluffy towel dropped from his hand. The glass of milk slipped from his fingers. It fell to the marble floor and shattered, sending white milk and broken glass everywhere. He didn't even look down at the mess. He didn't move. He just stared at Lila, his mouth open, and he breathed one single word like a ghost. "Elena?" Hello friends, welcome to our story. What happened next will shock you to your core. But before we find out, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to our channel. It really helps us bring you more amazing stories. Also, let us know in the comments where you are watching from. Are you in Texas or Canada or maybe the Philippines or India? We love to see where our story family lives. Hey, let's go back. To understand what just happened, we have to start at the beginning of this rainy, fateful day. The first sound Lila heard that morning was not the alarm clock. It was the cough. It was a deep, wet sound that rattled in the small, cold room. It was the sound of her mother, Elena, being sick. Lila opened her eyes. The room was gray and damp. The rain outside was tapping hard against the one cracked window. They lived in a tiny apartment on the 4th floor of an old, tilting building. The wallpaper was peeling and it always smelled like wet laundry. Lila and her mama shared the one bed. Lila sat up and looked at her mother. Elena's face was pale, almost gray in the morning light. Her eyes were closed, but she wasn't sleeping. She was trying to catch her breath after the cough. Her hand, thin and white, was pressed against her chest. "Mama?" Lila whispered. "Are you okay?" Elena's eyes opened. She tried to smile. "I'm fine, my little bird. Just a tickle in my throat." It wasn't a tickle. It was a monster. Lila knew. "I'll get you some water," Lila said. She slid off the bed. Her feet hit the cold, bare floor. She padded to the tiny kitchen area, which was just a sink and a counter in the same room. She filled a plastic cup with water and brought it to the bed. Elena's hand was shaking so much, Lila had to help her hold the cup. She took a small sip and then another coughing fit took her, this one so bad it shook her whole body. Lila's stomach twisted into a tight, cold knot. She was only 10 years old, but she felt like she was the mom. She felt the heavy weight of worry pressing down on her shoulders. Her eyes went to the small, cracked bedside table. To the brown medicine bottle. It was empty. Lila had watched her mother take the last spoonful last night. Elena had tried to hide it, but Lila saw. She saw the way her mother's eyes closed, knowing there was no more. Lila knew what she had to do. After her mother's coughing finally stopped, and she fell into a weak, restless sleep, Lila got dressed. She put on her old jeans and her thickest sweater. Then she went to the corner of the room that was her corner. There was a small wooden box. Inside were her treasures. Mama used to carve. Before she got too sick, she would sit by the window with a small knife and a piece of scrap wood. She taught Lila how. She taught her to carve little birds and small, simple roses. Lila's box was full of them. Tiny wooden flowers, little sparrows with their heads tilted, and a few little cats curled up, sleeping. She had spent weeks on them, carving until her fingers were sore. She gently packed them all into a worn burlap sack. She had sold them before in the park. A nice lady bought a bird for $5 once. An old man bought a flower for $3. But today she needed more than $5 or $3. She knew the price of the medicine. She had gone to the pharmacist by herself last week. The man behind the counter had looked at her sadly. "It's $50, sweetheart. It's a very expensive medicine." $50. Felt like a million. Lila put on her shoes. They had holes in the bottom, but they were her only pair. She found her old, bright yellow raincoat, which was 2 sizes too big. It used to be her mother's from a long, long time ago before Lila was born. She quietly kissed her mother's damp forehead. Elena didn't move. "I'll be back, Mama," Lila whispered. "I'll make you better. I promise." She grabbed her sack of carvings, opened the door to their apartment, and stepped out into the cold hallway. The city was loud and angry. The rain was coming down in hard, cold sheets. The wind blew the rain sideways, stinging Lila's face as soon as she stepped outside. She pulled her yellow hood up, but the wind just ripped it back down. Within seconds her hair was soaked. She walked for 20 minutes, her feet squishing in her wet shoes, until she got to the main shopping street. People were rushing by, their faces hidden under black umbrellas, their heads down. Lila stood by a storefront, her sack in her hands. She took out one of her best carvings, a little wooden rose. "Excuse me, ma'am," she said to a woman in a fancy coat. "Would you like to buy a flower? I made it. It's only—" The woman didn't even look at her. She just walked faster, splashing dirty puddle water all over Lila's legs. Lila's stomach growled. She hadn't eaten breakfast. There was only one piece of bread left this morning. Lila told her mom she wasn't hungry, so her mom ate it. A man from the store came out. We don't allow begging here, kid. Go on, shoo. Get out of the rain." "I'm not begging," Lila said, but her voice was small, and the man had already gone back inside. She felt tears prickle in her eyes, but she blinked them away. Crying was for babies. Crying wouldn't get the medicine. She stood there for an hour. The rain never stopped. Her hands were blue and numb with cold. Her clothes were soaked through. No one stopped. No one even looked at her. She felt a terrible, cold despair settle in her chest. She was going to fail. She would have to go home with no money, and Mama would just keep coughing and the bottle would stay empty. No. Lila clenched her small, cold fists. No. She remembered a story her mother told her once. A story about the Golden Hill, a place on the other side of the city. A place where rich people lived in houses as big as castles. "They have so much money," her mama had whispered, "that $50 is like 1 penny to them." Lila had never been there. It was miles away across the big scary bridge. But the thought was planted. $50 is like 1 penny to them. She put her little rose back in the sack, pulled her hood up as tight as she could and started walking. It was the longest walk of her life. She walked until her legs felt like jelly. She walked over the bridge with big loud trucks roaring past, shaking the whole ground. The wind up here was stronger and it almost pushed her over. When she got to the other side, everything was different. The buildings were gone. The noise was gone. The trash on the sidewalks was gone. Here there were giant trees and stone walls covered in green ivy. The houses, they weren't houses. They were palaces. They were hidden behind big black iron gates. Lila couldn't even see the front doors. This was scarier than the angry shopkeeper. This place was silent. It felt like no one lived here at all. She walked up to the first gate. It had a small metal box on it. She stood on her toes and pressed the button. A crackly voice came out. Yes. Hello. Lila stammered. I'm selling hand-carved wooden flowers. My mama is sick. Would you like to buy one? There was a long silence. Then the voice came back, cold and sharp. We do not buy things at the door. Please leave the property. A loud click sound and the speaker went silent. Lila's heart sank. She tried the next house. And the next. One person just laughed. Another gate had a gardener who just waved her away like she was a stray dog. She was so tired. Her legs were shaking. The rain was coming down harder now and she was shivering so hard her teeth were chattering. She came to the very last house on the street. It was the biggest one of all. It was set so far back from the road she could barely see it. The gate was black and tall with sharp spear points on the top. It looked like the castle from a scary fairy tale. Lila stood in front of it, her body screaming at her to give up, to go home and curl up in the cold bed with her mother. Just one more, she whispered to herself. She closed her eyes and saw her mother's pale, sleeping face. She heard the cough. $50. She reached for the intercom but it was too high. She looked around and saw a bigger button, a heavy old-fashioned one set into the stone wall. She put her whole hand on it and pushed. A deep bong sound echoed from somewhere inside. It was so loud it scared her and she stumbled back. She waited. 1 minute. 2 minutes. The rain poured down her face. Nothing. Okay, she whispered, her voice breaking. I'll go home. She turned to leave. And then she heard it. Click. Buzz. She turned back. The massive gate wasn't opening. But a small door, a little walkway door set inside the big gate, had buzzed open. Her heart leaped into her throat. He buzzed her in? He was letting her in? She pushed the small, heavy door. It creaked open, revealing a long, winding stone path that led through a beautiful, dark garden. Lila's heart was pounding. Mama always said never go into a stranger's house. But it was so cold out here. And this was her last chance. She took a deep breath and stepped inside the gate. It clicked shut behind her. She walked for what felt like forever. The path was made of smooth, gray stones. The garden was full of rose bushes, but none of them had flowers. They just had thorns which looked sad in the rain. Finally, she reached the house. The front door was made of wood so dark it looked black, and it was twice as tall as she was. In the middle was a giant, brass lion's head, holding a ring in its mouth. She was too scared to touch it. She raised her small blue hand to knock on the wood. But before her knuckles could even touch it, the giant door swung open. The sad man stood there. Mr. Alistair Vance. He was tall, wearing a dark sweater and dark pants. His hair was black with silver streaks at the side. And his eyes were the saddest thing she had ever seen. He didn't look angry. He just looked surprised. He stared down at the tiny dripping girl in the too big yellow raincoat. Lila's voice was shaking from cold and fear. She held up her burlap sack. Oh, sir, she stammered. I'm selling flowers. They're made of wood. My mama's sick and I need money for her medicine. Mr. Vance continued to stare. He wasn't looking at the sack. He was looking at her. At her face. At her eyes. Lila flinched, getting ready for him to yell to tell her to leave. But his voice was quiet. You? Come inside. He stepped back and held the enormous door open. Lila hesitated. Never go into a stranger's house. But the warmth from the house was rolling out, wrapping around her. And he didn't look mean. He just looked broken. She took one small step. Then another. She was inside. And that's when she saw the picture. That's when she asked the question. We are back to the moment the story began. Lila stands, shivering in the grand entryway. The broken glass and spilled milk are at the man's feet. His face is white, his hands are shaking. He is staring at her like he's seen a ghost. Elena? He whispered again. Then his voice stronger. Where did you say you live? On Elm Street, sir, Lila whispered, terrified. In the old apartments by the river. Mr. Vance stumbled back, one hand grabbing the fireplace mantel to steady himself. He looked from the photo of the laughing, vibrant woman in the yellow dress, to the small, pale, shivering child in the yellow raincoat. Elm Street, he whispered. He looked at her again, his eyes wide with a mix of fear and a wild, sudden hope. Tell me, child, your mother, Elena? What is your last name? Lila was confused by the strange question. It's Hayes, sir. Lila Hayes. At the name Hayes, the man's face didn't relax. It got worse. He looked like he had been struck. He looked devastated. Hayes. He repeated, his voice breaking. She married him. After all this, she married him. Lila just stood there, confused and scared. Married who? I don't have a dad. It's just me and Mama. The man turned to her, his sad eyes suddenly blazing with a new, terrifying fire. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was anger. An anger so deep it scared her more than the yelling shopkeeper. But it wasn't directed at her. It's all been a lie, he whispered, clenching his fists so hard his knuckles turned white. 10 years, all of it, a lie. He looked at Lila, his eyes full of a million questions, and took a step toward her. Child, we need to go. We need to go see your mother. Right now. Lila's heart was a trapped bird, beating against her ribs. The strange, sad man, Mr. Vance, was angry. But he wasn't yelling. It was a cold, quiet anger that was much, much scarier. He was looking at her, but it felt like he was looking through her. We need to go. Right now, he said again. His voice was hard like a stone. He grabbed a set of keys from a small glass bowl on a table. He didn't even look at the broken glass or the spilled milk on his perfect floor. He strode to a closet, pulled out a long black wool coat, it looked warmer and softer than Lila's entire bed, and pushed his arms into it. Sir? Lila whispered, her feet frozen to the floor. I don't understand. I can't go with you. My mama said. Your mama's picture is on my wall, child, he said, his voice sharp. He wasn't trying to be mean, but his mind was moving too fast. He was a man who had just seen a ghost. You said she's sick. You need medicine. I will take you. I will buy the medicine. But you must take me to her. He reached the giant front door and pulled it open. The cold, rainy wind rushed into the warm house, swirling around Lila's legs. Come, he said. It was not a request. Lila was terrified. She was alone with a stranger. A rich, angry stranger who was telling her to get in his car. Everything her mother had ever warned her against was happening right now. But then she looked back. She looked past the angry man, past the spilled milk, to the fireplace. She looked at the photograph. The woman in the picture, her mama, was so happy. She was laughing. Lila had never seen her laugh like that. This man knew that woman. He knew her mama from before, from the good times. And Mama was sick. The bottle was empty. $50 felt like a million miles away. Maybe this was the only way. Maybe this angry, sad man was the answer to her desperate, morning prayer. Oh, okay, Lila whispered, her voice so small the wind almost snatched it away. Okay, I'll take you. Mr. Vance didn't say another word. He just held the door open and waited. Lila pulled her yellow hood up, her old, wet shoes squeaking on the marble, and hurried past him out into the rain. He followed her, walking fast. He pressed a button on the little black key, and a car parked in the circular driveway gave a soft beep. It wasn't a car. It was a spaceship. It was long and black and so shiny that the raindrops looked like diamonds on it. It was bigger than any car Lila had ever seen. Mr. Vance pulled open the heavy passenger door. Get in, he said. Lila climbed inside. The seat was made of soft, tan leather. It was warm. When he closed the door, the sound of the rain and the wind vanished. It was completely silent, like being in a soft, warm bubble. He got in the driver's side and pushed a button. The car didn't make a loud, rumbling noise like the buses did. Just hummed. He pulled the car onto the long, winding driveway. Lila sat with her hands twisted in her lap. Her wet, dirty burlap sack of carvings was on the floor at her feet. She was afraid to move, afraid to get anything dirty. Mr. Vance drove fast. His hands were locked on the steering wheel, his knuckles white. He stared straight ahead at the rain, his jaw tight. Lila watched him out of the corner of her eye. His face was a storm of thoughts. He kept whispering things to himself. Hayes, of course. It was always him. And then, 10 years? She never told me. She left, for him. And a child, all this time a child. Lila couldn't be quiet anymore. Sir? He turned to look at her and his face softened just a little. The hard anger cracked and the deep, deep sadness she had seen first was back. He seemed to suddenly remember she was there. You're cold, he said, his voice suddenly gentle. He pressed a button on the dashboard. What's your name, child? Lila, sir. Lila. He said her name slowly, tasting it. I'm Alistair. He didn't look at her again, but a moment later, warm air began to puff out from a little vent by her feet. Felt so good. Lila wiggled her numb toes. Are you hungry, Lila? He asked, his eyes still on the road. Lila's stomach gave a loud, painful growl. She blushed, clamping her arms around her middle. Alistair heard it. A small, sad smile touched his lips for just a second. I'll get you some food. After we see your mother. His compassion made Lila feel braver. Mr. Alistair, sir? How do you know my mama? Alistair was quiet for a long time. The only sound was the thwip-thwip of the windshield wipers. I knew her, he finally said, his voice thick, a very long time ago. Before you were born. We were very good friends. Next, but, why are you angry? Lila asked. His hands tightened on the wheel again. Because Lila. I think I was lied to. I think your mother and I were both lied to by someone who wanted to hurt us. And they did. Lila didn't understand. Oh, who lied to you? That's what I'm going to find out, he said, his voice dark. He drove them over the big, rattling bridge, leaving the world of giant, silent mansions and plunging back into the noisy, gray, broken city. Lila gave him directions, her small voice pointing the way. Turn left here at the building with the broken sign. It's the last building on the street, sir. The one with the... She stopped. She was suddenly embarrassed. She was bringing this rich man in his spaceship car to her home. She saw it now through his eyes. The peeling paint, the overflowing trash cans out front, the cracked windows. Alistair pulled the shiny black car to a stop in front of her building. He didn't say anything. He just stared. He stared at the crumbling brick. He stared at the dark, scary doorway. He stared at the puddle of dirty water that covered the whole front step. His anger seemed to drain away, replaced by a look of horror. A sick, pale, confused look. She lives here, he whispered. It wasn't a judgment. It was a question he couldn't understand. The woman from the photograph, the laughing girl in the yellow dress, lived here. Come on, Lila said quietly. She pushed the heavy car door open and stepped back out into the cold rain. Alistair got out of the car. He didn't seem to notice the rain or the dirt. He was in a daze. He followed Lila as she hopped over the puddle and pushed open the building's front door. The hallway was dark. The only light came from one flickering bulb at the far end. It smelled like wet cement and old cooking. It's on the 4th floor, Lila said. The elevator's been broken for a year. We have to take the stairs. She led the way. Alistair, tall and imposing in his expensive black coat, followed her up the creaking narrow steps. He had to duck his head to avoid hitting the low ceiling. With every floor they climbed, Lila could hear his breathing get heavier. But it wasn't from the exercise. It sounded like he was in pain. Finally they reached the 4th floor. Lila walked down the hallway to the last door. Room 412. She put her cold, small hand on the doorknob. She was suddenly terribly afraid. She had no idea what she was doing. She was bringing a storm into their tiny, quiet room. Lila? Is that you? Her mother's voice. It was so weak, so thin like a piece of paper. You were gone so long. I was worried. Lila looked back at Alistair. His face was pale. His eyes were closed. He looked like he was praying. Or bracing for a blow. Go on, he whispered, his voice rough. Open the door. Lila took a deep breath. She turned the knob and pushed the door open. Mama, she said, stepping inside. I'm home. I brought someone. The room was small and gray. The rain tapped against the single, cracked window. Elena was lying on the thin mattress on the floor, buried under a pile of old blankets. The room was cold. Elena pushed herself up on one elbow. Her hair was damp and stuck to her pale forehead. Her eyes were large and dull with fever. Lila, my bird, who did you? Who? Her voice died. She was looking past Lila at the tall man who was standing in the doorway, filling it completely. Time stopped. The whole world stopped. The only sound was the rain and Elena's sudden, sharp, gasping breath. Alistair stared at the woman on the mattress. This was not the laughing girl from his photograph. This was a stranger. A sick, broken, terrified stranger who had her eyes. Elena, he whispered. His voice was full of 10 years of pain, 10 years of questions. Elena's face went from sick to terrified. The color drained from her cheeks, leaving her a ghostly white. Her hand flew to her mouth and her eyes, wide with a sudden, panicked terror, filled with tears. It was not the reunion he had imagined. It was not anger or love or sadness. It was fear. She was looking at him like he was the monster. Alistair, she whispered. Her voice was like glass. No. Oh no. No, no, no. She tried to scramble backward, pushing herself against the damp, stained wall. You can't be here, she gasped, her voice suddenly strong with panic. You have to go. Now. Lila was stunned. Mama? What's wrong? This is Mr. Alistair. He has your picture. He's here to help. Help. Elena's laugh was a terrible, sharp sound. Oh God. Lila, you don't know what you've done. Alistair, please, she begged, her eyes locked on his. You have to leave. If he finds out you were here, if he knows you found us. Alistair was completely frozen. His anger, his assumptions, all of it, shattered. This was not the reaction of a woman who had left him for another man. This was the reaction of a hostage. Elena, he said, taking a slow step into the room. What are you talking about? Who will find me? I thought you were married. I thought, Hayes, married. Elena sobbed, shaking her head so hard her hair flew around her face. You thought I? She looked at Lila and then back at Alistair, a new horror dawning on her face. Alistair, please, she begged, her voice frantic. You'll put her in danger. You'll put Lila in danger. Just go. Forget you saw us. Please. Alistair's mind was spinning. This was all wrong. His entire theory, his 10-year-old story of betrayal, was wrong. His anger evaporated, replaced by a cold, terrible dread. Danger from who, Elena? He asked, his voice low and urgent. He knelt, right there on the dirty, cold floor so he was level with her. Danger from Hayes? Elena's sobs stopped. She looked at him, her eyes wide and confused. Hayes, she whispered. Robert Hayes is dead. He's been dead for 9 years. He died before Lila was even born. Alistair felt like the floor had fallen out from under him. Dead? But Lila's last name. It was my name, Alistair. My name before I met you. I never changed it back. Elena was trembling, her eyes darting to the door and back. I'm not afraid of Robert. I'm afraid of her. Alistair's blood ran cold. He knew before she even said it. He knew. Her, he whispered. Elena looked at her daughter, her small, brave, terrified daughter, who had just brought the past crashing into their fragile present. She looked back at the only man she had ever loved. Yes, Elena whispered, her voice breaking. I'm afraid of your mother. The single, weak word hung in the tiny, cold room, heavier and more dangerous than a bomb. Mother. Alistair didn't move. He stayed kneeling on the cold floor, his hands just inches from Elena's. He felt the blood drain from his face. It was as if the last 10 years, a decade of confusion, of bitterness, of a deep aching void in his life, snapped into a horrible, perfect, terrible focus. It wasn't a stranger. It wasn't a rival. It was his own family. His own blood. Elena was still looking at him with that same frantic terror. She was breathing in short, shallow gasps, her hands still pressed to her mouth. You have to go, she whispered again, her voice desperate. Alistair, you don't understand. She sees everything. She has people. She always told me she would know if I ever. Elena, Alistair said. His voice was quiet, but it cut through her panic. All the anger he'd felt in the car, the betrayal he'd imagined, was gone. It had been replaced by a cold, sinking horror. What did she do to you? Lila was standing by the door, her small body trembling. She was completely lost. Mama? Oh, who are you afraid of? Is it the man's mother? The man from the picture? Elena looked at her daughter, her heart breaking. She had spent 10 years building a tiny, fragile wall around them, and in one morning, it had been smashed to pieces. Alistair saw the fear in Elena's eyes as she looked at Lila. He understood. He turned to the little girl, his voice suddenly, impossibly gentle. Lila, your mother and I, we need to talk. It's grown-up talk. It's about the picture. He reached into the pocket of his dark wool coat. Lila flinched, but he just pulled out his wallet. It was thick and made of black leather. He opened it and pulled out 2 crisp bills. A 50 and a 20. He held them out to her. Your mama needs her medicine. I promised. The pharmacy, is it close? Lila's eyes went wide. $70. It was more money than she had seen in her entire life. It's just on the corner, sir, she whispered. Downstairs. 2 blocks. Good girl, Alistair said, his voice soft. I want you to go to the pharmacy. Right now. Buy the medicine. The big bottle. And buy some food. Some milk for yourself. And maybe some soup. Something hot. Can you do that for me? Can you be a brave helper? He was giving her a job. He was trusting her. Lila looked at her mother. Elena was still watching Alistair, her fear mixed with a new confusion. But she nodded just once. It was okay. Lila took the money, her small, cold hand touching his. Yes, sir. I can do that. And Lila, Alistair said, holding her gaze. Take your time. Don't run. Be safe. We will be right here when you get back. Lila nodded. She clutched the money in her fist and with one last worried look at her mother, she slipped out the door, pulling it almost closed behind her, but leaving a tiny, tiny crack. She didn't mean to, but she was scared to leave them alone. The moment the click of the building's front door echoed up the stairwell, Alistair turned back to Elena. The room was silent. Now, he said, his voice a low, painful rumble. Tell me what my mother did. Elena's fragile composure broke. The tears she had been holding back for 10 years finally came. She crumpled, sobbing, her thin body shaking under the pile of blankets. I never, she choked out. I never stopped loving you. I never wanted to leave. I would have died before I left you. I know, Alistair whispered, his heart breaking. I know that now. Elena, please, tell me. So she did. The story came pouring out, a fast, terrified rush of words, as if saying it out loud might make the monster appear. It was after you proposed, she whispered, her hands twisting the blanket. The night after. I was so happy. I thought we were going to be together forever. Alistair's eyes closed. He remembered that night. He had given her a simple, small ring. They had danced in his apartment with no music, just laughing. Your mother, Catherine. She came to my apartment. The small one I had back then. I was so happy to see her. I thought she was coming to welcome me to the family. Elena's laugh was a bitter, broken sound. She looked around my little room. She had this look on her face like she was smelling something bad. And then she offered me money. Alistair's fist clenched. How much? $100,000, Elena whispered. She just opened her checkbook. She said, a girl like you, you'll be set for life. You can go anywhere, be anything. Just, not with my son. And you? I told her no. Elena said, her voice rising with the old, painful memory. I threw the check back at her. I told her I loved you. I told her that her money was dirty, that I would never leave you, and that you would hate her when I told you what she'd done. Alistair's heart swelled with a painful pride. Of course she had. That was the woman he knew. And then. Elena's voice dropped, her eyes going dark with the memory. She stopped smiling. Her face became, like stone. She said, you're right. You won't leave him. So I'll just have to destroy him instead. Alistair went completely still. What? She had a file. A black folder. She opened it on my coffee table. It was papers, things about your father's company, about deals he made years ago. Before he died. She said they were illegal. That she had kept them secret all this time. She said, if I didn't disappear, if I didn't break your heart so completely that you would never look for me, she would release them all to the newspapers. She said she would destroy your father's name, destroy your company, destroy you. She said you'd be ruined. Alistair felt sick. He had a vague memory. After his father's death, his mother taking control of the estate, of cleaning things up. He'd never questioned it. She told me I had to choose, Elena sobbed, her body shaking. Your future, or our love. She said I had to be cruel. I had to vanish. She said it was the only way to protect you. So you ran, Alistair whispered, the pieces falling into place. Yes, I ran. I took the money. I took it because I knew it would make her lie more believable. I knew she would tell you I was a gold digger. I wanted her to. I wanted you to hate me. Because if you hated me, you wouldn't look for me. You would be safe. Alistair's throat was so tight he could barely speak. She told me you ran off with Robert Hayes. She had a letter. A goodbye letter. From you. She made me write it, Elena cried. She stood over me. She told me what to say. That I had been seeing him all along, that her money was just a bonus. Oh, Alistair, it was all lies. And I believed her, Alistair said, his voice raw with self-hatred. For 10 years. I hated you. And you were just protecting me. I went to another city, Elena whispered, her voice growing weaker. I was going to start over. And then I found out. Found out what? Elena looked at the door where Lila had just been. Her eyes met Alistair's. I was pregnant. The world stopped. Alistair's vision tunneled. He looked at the thin, sick woman on the bed and his mind raced back. 10 years, 9 months. Lila. He breathed. He looked at his own hands. He looked at Elena's eyes. And he saw his eyes. Reflected in hers. Lila is. She's yours, Alistair, Elena whispered, her voice breaking. She's your daughter. Alistair couldn't breathe. A daughter. A daughter. He had a child. The little girl with the big, sad eyes. The girl in the yellow raincoat. She was his. I tried to call you, Elena was saying, her voice fading. She was exhausted. The confession had taken everything she had. I tried, once. I got so scared. I thought, you had to know. But, she answered. Your mother. She knew I was calling. She told me, if you tell him, Alistair, I will keep my promise. And then, I will take the child from you. A court will see you're an unfit mother. You'll lose both of them. So I ran again. I hid. I've been hiding ever since. Her words were slurring. The emotion, the sickness, the confession. It was too much. Alistair, his mind reeling with the revelation, a daughter, shook himself back to the present. He saw Elena's face, which was now a waxy, pale gray. Elena, he said, his voice sharp with a new fear. She didn't answer. She was slumped against the wall, her eyes half closed. Elena. He scrambled forward, grabbing her thin, cold arm. She was still breathing, but it was shallow. A small, rattling sound was in her chest. He gently shook her. Elena, stay with me. Stay with me. Lila's coming back. Elena's eyes fluttered. She was trying to focus on him. So tired. She whispered. So cold. And then it happened. Her body pushed too far, gave up. A deep, racking cough exploded from her chest. It wasn't the small, sick cough Lila had heard. This was a monster. It was a horrible, tearing sound. She gasped, and another cough ripped through her, and another. Elena. Alistair shouted, pulling her into his arms, trying to support her. A small, dark spot of red appeared on her pale lips. Oh God, Alistair breathed. The door flew open. Lila stood there, a small paper bag in one hand, the medicine bottle in the other. Her face was a mask of pure terror. Mama? She saw her mother limp in this stranger's arms. She saw the dark, terrifying red on her mother's mouth. Elena's eyes rolled back. She went completely limp. No, 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 no. Alistair yelled. He was back in the mansion, the milk glass shattering, but this was a million times worse. This was her life shattering. He looked at Lila, who was frozen by the door, tears streaming down her face. There was no more time for sadness. No more time for the past. There was only now. In one powerful movement, Alistair stood up, scooping Elena's frail, light body into his arms. He was shocked at how little she weighed. She was just bones and blankets. He looked at his daughter. His daughter. Lila, he commanded, his voice a roar. Drop the bag. Come with me. We are going to the hospital. Now. He didn't wait. He ran. He burst through the small doorway, carrying Elena as if she weighed nothing. He flew down the dark, narrow hallway, taking the stairs two at a time. Lila, jolted out of her terror by the power in his voice, dropped the medicine and the soup. The bag hit the floor with a sad thud. Wait, she screamed, tears flying from her face. Wait for me. She scrambled after him, her small legs pumping, her heart pounding with a terror she had never known. She ran down the flights of stairs, following the sound of his powerful footsteps, a desperate, crying child chasing after the only two people she had in the world. Alistair exploded out of the dark, crumbling building and into the driving rain. He was a man possessed, his mind a hurricane of three facts. Elena was dying. Lila was his daughter. And his mother was a monster. He ran, his expensive leather shoes splashing through the dirty puddles. Elena was a terrifying, impossible weight in his arms, not heavy but too light. He could feel the small, sharp bones of her body through the thin, damp blankets. She was unconscious, her head lolling against his shoulder, her breathing a shallow, terrible rattle. Wait for me. Lila's scream was a thin, high-pitched wail that cut through the sound of the rain. She was running as fast as her small legs could carry her, her yellow raincoat flapping, her face a mask of pure, uncomprehending terror. She had dropped the medicine, the food, everything. Her world was reduced to that one terrible sight. Her mother, limp and broken, being stolen away by this powerful stranger. Alistair reached his car, the long, black, shiny spaceship that looked so alien on this broken street. He fumbled with his keys, his hands shaking. He unlocked the back door and, with a gentleness that was a stark contrast to his frantic speed, He laid Elena down on the soft, tan leather seat. He turned just as Lila reached him, sobbing, her small hands raised as if to beat on his chest. "What did you do? What did you do to my mama?" There was no time. No time to explain, no time to comfort. He just looked at her, his daughter, and his heart shattered. He didn't speak. He just scooped her up, his arms strong and sure around her tiny, trembling body, and opened the front passenger door. He deposited her into the seat, his movements fast and precise. "Put your seatbelt on," he commanded, his voice a harsh bark. He slammed the door, ran to the driver's side, and threw himself into the seat. The engine hummed to life. Lila was fumbling with the belt, her hands shaking too hard to make it click. I can't." Alistair leaned over, his body invading her space, and grabbed the belt. He clicked it into place in one violent motion. His face was inches from hers. She could see the panic in his eyes, the deep, agonizing fear. He wasn't a monster. He was just as scared as she was. He slammed the car into gear. The tires screamed on the wet pavement, and the car shot forward, throwing Lila back against the warm seat. The drive was a blur of terror. Alistair drove like a madman. He honked the horn, a long, angry, desperate sound. He swerved around slow-moving trucks. He ran a red light, causing other cars to slam on their brakes and blare their horns at him. She's not. Lila whispered, her voice trembling. "She's not dead, is she?" Alistair's hands were locked on the steering wheel, his knuckles white. He was staring straight ahead, his jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might break. "No," he said, his voice raw. "She's not. I won't let her. I will not let her." He was whispering to himself now, a frantic, broken prayer. "Hang on, Elena. Just hang on. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, 10 years. I'm so sorry." He looked at Lila, just a quick, flashing glance. He saw her pale, tear-streaked face. He saw her big, terrified eyes, his eyes. "My daughter," he whispered, so quietly Lila almost didn't hear it. "Oh God, I have a daughter." Lila didn't understand the words. She just stared at the city flashing by, a gray, wet, terrifying smear. She had never moved so fast in her life. This man, he had broken all the rules. He had come into their room and now Mama was... The car suddenly swerved, throwing her against the seatbelt, and pulled up under a bright, covered driveway. Before the car had even stopped moving, Alistair was shouting, "Help! I need help in here. Somebody help me." He threw his door open and ran to the back, pulling Elena out. Lila watched, frozen, as the big glass doors of the hospital slid open and a team of people in blue and white clothes came running out with a gurney. "What do we have?" a woman with kind eyes and a sharp voice asked as they gently, quickly took Elena from Alistair's arms. I don't know," Alistair stammered, his powerful voice gone, replaced by the broken, scared voice of a normal man. She's sick. Pneumonia maybe. She collapsed. She was coughing blood." "We've got her," the doctor said. "We'll take it from here." They were moving fast, pushing the gurney with Elena on it, surrounding her, attaching things to her. They rushed her through the sliding doors. "Wait, Mama!" Lila screamed. She finally unbuckled her belt and tumbled out of the car, her feet hitting the pavement. Alistair grabbed her hand. His own was huge and warm and shaking. "We have to let them work, Lila. We have to wait." He pulled her inside, through the automatic doors, into a room that was huge and white and smelled like clean, sharp chemicals. The team had already disappeared with Elena through a set of big, swinging doors marked, "Emergency, Staff Only." And then, they were alone. The room was painfully bright. A television on the wall was playing a cartoon with no sound. A few other people were sitting in blue plastic chairs, looking tired and sad. Alistair stood in the middle of the room, his expensive coat dripping rainwater onto the clean, white floor. He was breathing hard as if he had run all the way. He looked lost, his purpose, getting her here, was done. Now there was nothing to do but wait. Lila was shivering. The warmth of the car was gone, and the wetness of her clothes was seeping back in. Her yellow raincoat, her mama's old coat, felt heavy and cold. Alistair looked down at her. He really looked at her as if for the first time. He saw the soaked hair plastered to her small, pale face. He saw her chattering teeth. He saw her, his daughter, standing in a puddle, looking small and terrified and utterly alone. A quiet, choked sound came from his throat. "Oh, Lila," he whispered. He unbuttoned his long black wool coat, the one that probably cost more than a year's rent on their apartment, and slid it off his shoulders. He knelt in front of her, right there on the hospital floor. He wrapped the giant heavy warm coat around her small shoulders. It was huge. It swallowed her completely, the sleeves hanging down past her knees. It smelled like him, like expensive soap and old books and the clean electric smell of the rain. It was the warmest thing she had ever felt. You're safe, he whispered, his voice thick. He didn't know if he was talking to her or to himself. It's going to be okay. He gently led her to the blue plastic chairs and they sat down. Lila was so small she disappeared inside his coat. Alistair sat beside her, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped together as if he was praying. For a long time they just sat in the terrible bright silence. Lila's shivering finally stopped. The warmth of the coat was like a hug. She looked at the man beside her. His face was in his hands. His shoulders were shaking. She had never seen a man cry before. Not like this. Sir, she whispered. Mr. Alistair? He looked up. His eyes were red. Alistair, he said. Just Alistair. Alistair. Is my mama going to die? The word felt horrible in her mouth. Alistair's face crumpled. He took a deep, shaky breath. No. I won't let that happen. The doctors here. They are the best in the world. They will make her better. They have to. Lila believed him. He had said it with so much power it had to be true. She took a small, brave breath. Why did you call me your daughter? Alistair flinched. He looked at her, his eyes full of a pain so deep Lila could feel it. He had to tell her. He couldn't lie. Not anymore. Lila. He started, his voice rough. He reached out and gently touched her still damp hair. The picture in my house, of your mama, is there because I loved her. I loved her more than anything in the world. Like in a fairy tale? Lila whispered. Yes, he said, a sad smile touching his lips. Just like in a fairy tale. And she loved me. But someone lied to us. A very powerful, very unkind person tricked us. She made your mama go away. She made her hide from me. Oh, who was so mean? Alistair's jaw tightened. My mother. Lila gasped. A grandmother. A mean grandmother. This was like a fairy tale. I didn't know, Lila, Alistair said, his voice desperate, leaning closer. I looked for your mama. For 10 years I looked, but I never found her. And I never knew about you. His eyes filled with fresh tears. Your mama, she just told me. Before she got sicker. She told me that you are my daughter. Lila stared at him. A dad. This was her dad. The dad she had wished for every birthday, every time she saw a father pushing his kid on a swing in the park. This sad, powerful, crying man was hers. You're my dad? She whispered. Yes, he said, his voice breaking. A tear rolled down his cheek and he didn't wipe it away. Yes, Lila. I am. And I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I wasn't there. I'm sorry you were cold. I'm sorry you were hungry. I'm sorry for all of it. If I had known, oh Lila, if I had known, I would have torn the world apart to find you. Lila didn't know what to say. Her world had tilted, spun around, and settled in a new place. It was terrifying and sad and wonderful. She did the only thing that felt right. She slid off the chair and, tangled in his giant coat, she stepped forward and wrapped her small arms around his neck. Alistair froze. And then his whole body shuddered. He hugged her back, his strong arms wrapping around her, pulling her onto his lap, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. He buried his face in her damp hair and he sobbed. He cried for the 10 lost years, for the lost nights, for the first steps and first words he had missed. And Lila, his daughter, hugged him back, her own tears soaking his expensive sweater. She wasn't just crying for her mama. She was crying because she had found her dad. Mr. Vance. Alistair's head snapped up. A doctor stood in front of them. It was the woman with the kind eyes. She was holding a clipboard and her face was no longer kind. It was tired and grave. Alistair gently set Lila on the chair beside him, but he kept his arm locked around her. Yes? Is Elena, is she okay? The doctor took a deep breath. Mr. Vance, your friend, is very, very sick. Alistair's hand tightened on Lila's shoulder. What is it? It's acute bacterial pneumonia, the doctor said, her voice low and professional. But it's complicated by, well, to be blunt, by severe long-term malnutrition. Her body has no reserves. No strength to fight. We've put her on powerful antibiotics and a ventilator to help her breathe, but Her system is shutting down. What are you saying? Alistair said, his voice small. I'm saying, the doctor said, her eyes full of compassion, that she is in critical condition. We are doing everything we can. But you and the little girl, you need to prepare yourselves for the worst. The words hit Alistair like a physical blow. Prepare for the worst. No, he had just found her. He had just found them. No, he said. You don't understand. I can pay. I'll pay anything. Get a specialist. Fly someone in. Whatever it takes. Mr. Vance, this isn't about money, the doctor said gently. This is about time. She waited too long. We're just not sure if we can bring her back. Alistair's world went silent. He could hear the blood rushing in his ears. He looked at Lila, who was watching the doctor, her small face pale with a dawning comprehension. The worst? And in that moment of perfect agonizing silence, his phone buzzed. It was in his pants pocket. It was a loud, angry, vibrating sound against his leg. He ignored it. It buzzed again. And again. BZZZT, BZZZT, BZZZT. Mr. Vance? The doctor said. I need a minute, Alistair said, holding up a hand. He was trying to breathe. He pulled his phone out of his pocket, his hand shaking, his mind numb. He was going to turn it off, to throw it against the wall. But he saw the screen. He saw the name. And his blood didn't just run cold. It turned to solid ice. The screen was bright, and the name on it was one he had not seen in months. The name of the person who had caused all of this. The architect of his 10-year-long nightmare. The phone buzzed again, demanding. The caller ID flashed, bright and terrible. Mother. Alistair stared at the phone. He looked at the doctor, who was telling him the love of his life was dying. He looked at his daughter, who was watching him with terrified, trusting eyes. His mother somehow knew. She knew he had found them. The monster was at the gate. The phone vibrated again, an angry, buzzing insect against Alistair's leg. Mother. The name on the screen was a judgment. It was a threat. He was trapped. In front of him, a doctor was telling him his love was dying. Beside him, his daughter, was trembling, her small, pale face looking to him for answers he didn't have. And in his hand, the woman who had built this entire nightmare was calling. The world went silent. The beeping of the hospital machines, the quiet sobs from a family down the hall, the doctor's compassionate, waiting face, it all faded. There was only the phone. His thumb, shaking with a rage so cold it burned, pressed the green accept icon. He didn't say hello. He didn't wait. He just held the phone to his ear. Silence. And then her voice. Smooth, calm, and as cold as the marble floor in his mansion. Alistair, darling. Is that any way to speak to me? You've forgotten your manners. What do you want? He said. It wasn't a question. It was a demand. Oh, I just had a feeling, his mother Catherine purred. A little premonition. I had a feeling you might be somewhere. Unpleasant. You've been very busy today, haven't you? Alistair's blood turned to ice. He'd been found. It had only been an hour? How? He whispered, his voice a low, dangerous growl. Darling, please. You know I have people. I've always had people. A little girl in a soaking wet, bright yellow raincoat, showing up at your front gate? It's sloppy, Alistair. Very, very sloppy. Getting your emotions all over the marble. She let out a small, disappointed sigh. And now, at City General Hospital, making a scene in the emergency room? Tisk tisk. You're drawing attention. He had been followed. From the moment Lila stepped inside his gate. His mother had been watching. Elena's terror, her frantic, desperate warning. She sees everything. She has people. Was real. You, he breathed, his voice shaking with a decade of suppressed fury. You did this. All of this. I protected our family, Catherine corrected him, her voice as sharp as broken glass. As I always do. I protected you from a mistake. A very expensive, very emotional mistake. And now it seems that mistake has come back. I suggest you remember who you are, Alistair. And this distraction. And come home. We can discuss how to clean this up in a civilized manner. Clean this up? He repeated. He looked at Lila, who was watching him, her eyes wide with fear. Clean this up? Don't be dramatic. Donation. A private clinic. She'll be made comfortable. And the child? We can arrange for a good school. Somewhere. Far away. That was it. The thread of his control snapped. Stay away from them, Alistair said, his voice no longer a whisper, but a low, vibrating roar that made a nurse at the desk look up. If you come near this hospital, if you even think Elena's name, I will destroy you. I will use every penny of my money to burn your world to the ground. You spent my entire life teaching me how to be a ruthless businessman? You got it? I will see you in court. I will see you in ruin." There was a pause. And then, a laugh. A short, cold, humorless laugh. "You're threatening me? Oh, Alistair. You're emotional. You're not thinking clearly. You're still just a little boy throwing a tantrum. Try me," he hissed. "I will," she said, her voice suddenly void of all fake warmth. "I'll be there in 20 minutes to take control of this situation. To clean up your mess. Don't dare." Alistair slammed the end call button. His entire body was shaking. "Mr. Vance." The doctor's voice brought him crashing back. He was back in the bright, sterile waiting room. The doctor and Lila were both staring at him, their faces pale. They had heard his side of the terrifying call. Alistair's grief and his rage combined, hardening into something new. Into a cold, diamond-hard resolve. He turned to the doctor. His voice was no longer pleading. It was the voice of a billionaire. It was the voice of a CEO. It was the voice of a man in total, absolute control. "Dr. Evans," he said, his voice sharp and loud. "You said, prepare for the worst. That is not an option. That is off the table." The doctor flinched. "Sir, I don't think you." "You," Alistair said, pointing a shaking finger at her, "are going to move Elena Hayes to the penthouse suite. Immediately. You are going to assign her a private, round-the-clock team. You are going to call Dr. Eris Thorne at Johns Hopkins. He is the best pulmonary specialist in the country. You are going to tell him my jet is on the way to pick him up. He will be here, tonight." The doctor's mouth had fallen open. "Mr. Vance, that's impossible. I own a controlling interest in this hospital's board," Alistair said, his voice deadly quiet. "I can have your license, or I can make you chief of medicine. You will not let her die. You will find something better than a ventilator. You will find a miracle. I will sign whatever you need. Do you understand me?" The doctor, stunned by the sheer raw power, just nodded. Yes. Yes, Mr. Vance. The penthouse suite. Of course. I'll make the calls. Right now." She turned and practically ran, her clipboard clutched to her chest. Alistair stood there, his chest heaving. The rage began to fade and the terrible, cold fear rushed back in. He was alone in the middle of the waiting room with his daughter. He knelt in front of her. His entire body was trembling. "Lila," he said, his voice breaking again. That was my mother. The mean grandmother." Lila's small hand, which was still lost inside the sleeve of his giant coat, came up and touched his cheek. She's coming here?" Lila whispered. "Yes," Alistair said, his heart breaking. I think so." "Is she?" Lila's voice was tiny. "Is she going to hurt Mama? Is she going to take me away?" The question shattered what was left of Alistair's composure. This tiny, brave girl. Her entire life had been spent hiding from a monster. His monster. "No," he said, and he pulled her off the chair and into a fierce, desperate hug. "Listen to me, Lila. I will never, ever let anyone take you. You are my daughter. You are my family. She is nothing. I will burn. I will burn everything down before I let her lay a hand on you. Do you hear me?" "I hear you," Lila cried softly into his sweater. "Mr. Vance." A different voice. A kind-faced nurse. We've prepared the private waiting room for you and your daughter. It's just this way. It's quieter." Alistair nodded, his face buried in Lila's hair. He stood up, lifting Lila with him. He carried her, his one arm holding her tight against his chest as he followed the nurse. They went through a set of keycard-locked doors, into a hallway that was carpeted and quiet. The nurse opened a door at the end. The room was not a waiting room. It was a beautiful private room with a soft sofa, a television, and a small kitchen counter. The lights were dim. We found these in the gift shop," the nurse said, holding up a small, folded set of blue sweatpants and a t-shirt with the hospital's teddy bear logo on it. "For her. To get out of those wet clothes. And I brought some hot chocolate." Alistair looked at the nurse, his eyes red and grateful. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you, so much." The nurse nodded and left, quietly closing the door. Alistair set Lila down on the soft sofa. He helped her take off his giant, wet coat and her own small, soaking raincoat. He helped her pull the warm, dry t-shirt over her head. She looked so small. So fragile. He handed her the warm mug of hot chocolate. Her hands were shaking as she took it. He went to the window. He was pacing. His mind was at war. He had to call security. He had to lock down the hospital. He had to... Dad. The word, spoken for the first time, it stopped him cold. He turned. Lila was looking at him from the sofa, the big mug in her small hands. Is Mama going to be in a room like this? She asked. Better, he said, his voice thick. The best room they have. With lots of doctors. The best doctors. Good, she whispered. She took a small sip of the hot chocolate. For 1 second there was peace. Just a father and a daughter in a quiet room, safe from the storm. The door swished open. Alistair spun around, his heart leaping into his throat. He expected the doctor. He expected the nurse. He did not expect her. Catherine Vance stood in the doorway. She was perfect. Her silver-gray hair was swept into a flawless bun. She was wearing a pearl-gray suit and matching heels, not a single drop of rain on her. She looked calm, powerful, and completely in control. She looked at Alistair, her face a mask of cold disappointment. Then her eyes moved. They slid past her son and landed on the small girl on the sofa. She looked at Lila, who was frozen, clutching the mug of hot chocolate, her eyes wide with terror. Catherine's gaze was cold. Clinical. Like she was looking at an insect. Oh, Alistair, she said, and her voice was not angry. It was worse. It was tired. You hung up on me. And this is the mess you made. She took a graceful step into the room, her eyes never leaving the terrified child. It's so much worse than I thought, she whispered. She looked directly at Lila. So, she said, her voice as sharp and cold as ice. You're the one. Lila's small body was frozen. The mug of hot chocolate trembled in her hands. The mean grandmother was here. The monster from her mother's stories was real, and she was beautiful, and she was terrible. Catherine Vance stood in the doorway, a perfect, cold statue of power. Her icy gaze was locked on Lila. So, she said again, her voice like a razor, you're the one. Lila couldn't move. She couldn't breathe. But then something big and warm moved. Alistair stepped in front of Lila. He physically blocked his daughter from his mother's view. His body in his simple sweater became a shield. He was taller than his mother. He was stronger. And for the first time in his entire life, he was not her son. He was a father. Get out, he said. His voice was not the angry roar she had heard on the phone. It was something far, far scarier. It was a low, dead, final sound. Catherine's perfect eyebrow raised. Alistair, don't be ridiculous. You are making a fool of yourself. I am here to fix this. Now move aside. I need to. You, Alistair said, his voice cutting her off, will never speak to my daughter again. You will never speak to Elena again. And you will never step foot in this room or any room that I am in for the rest of your life. Get out. Catherine let out a small, huffing laugh. It was a sound of pure disbelief. You think you can give me orders? You think this tantrum, changes anything? I am Catherine Vance. I built the world you live in. You are nothing without me. You will be ruined by this trash. She tried to step around him. I will speak to the hospital administrator. I will have this person moved to a state facility. Do you know what she told me? Alistair's voice was so quiet, so full of a new, cold knowledge, that it stopped Catherine in her tracks. Her hand, reaching for the door, froze. Alistair didn't turn. He kept his back to his mother, his eyes on his terrified daughter. Lila, he said, his voice suddenly soft, cover your ears for me, sweetheart. Just for 1 minute. Like we're playing a game. I'm right here. Lila, her eyes wide, slowly raised her small hands and pressed them over her ears. Alistair turned. The face he showed his mother was not one she had ever seen. The sad, broken boy was gone. This was a king. And he was passing judgment. She told me about the files, he said, his voice a low, lethal whisper. The black folder. The one you used to destroy her. Catherine's face for the first time changed. The perfect mask cracked. A flicker of fear entered her eyes. She's lying, Catherine hissed. No, Alistair said. She's not. But I finally understand. All my life you told me my father was a brilliant, ruthless man. You told me he was the one who made the difficult deals. The ones in the gray area. The ones that built our fortune. He took a step toward her. Catherine instinctively took a step back. But it wasn't him, was it, Mother? Alistair whispered. My father, he was the kind one. He was the one who gave money away. You were the one in the gray. You were the one who made the illegal deals. You were the one who threatened and bribed and hid. He saw the truth in her eyes. The blood had drained from her face. Those files, they aren't my father's ruin, Alistair said, the terrible final piece clicking into place. They're yours. You threatened Elena. You drove away the woman I loved, to protect yourself. To keep her from telling me what kind of monster you really are. Catherine's hand flew to her pearls. She had no words. She was, for the first time in her life, silent. You have two choices, Alistair said, his voice as cold as her heart. You can walk out of that door and you will sign over your half of the company to my new trust. A trust one I'm creating for my daughter. You will retire. You will move to the house in Switzerland. And you will never contact us again. And if I don't, she whispered, her voice a dry rasp. Then I will call the police, Alistair said simply. I will give them the files. I will give them the story of a 10-year-long terror-filled campaign against a poor, sick woman. I will tell them how you threatened her with prison and how you stole my child from me. He smiled. It was a terrible, cold smile. Who do you think the newspapers will believe, Mother? The poor girl you always talked about? Or the grieving billionaire's son, who just found out his own mother is a criminal? Catherine Vance stared at her son. He had beaten her. He had used her own rules, her own cold, ruthless logic against her. And he had won. Her face, which had been a mask of power, crumpled. It didn't just crack. It collapsed. In 1 second she looked old, small, and defeated. She looked at Lila, still sitting on the couch, her hands over her ears, her eyes shut tight. You've destroyed everything, Catherine whispered. No, Alistair said, his voice final. You did. I'm just cleaning it up. He stepped aside from the door. Go. Catherine, her shoulders slumped, her perfect mask gone, looked at him one last time. There was no love. There was no sadness. There was just emptiness. She turned, and in her perfect, quiet, expensive heels, she walked out of the room. She didn't look back. Alistair stood there for a long moment, his whole body shaking. The fight was over. He let out a breath he felt like he'd been holding for 10 years. Lila, he said softly. You can take your hands down now. Lila slowly lowered her hands. She looked at the empty doorway and then at her father. Is the mean grandmother gone? Yes, sweetheart, he whispered, his voice thick. She's gone. For good. He walked over to the sofa and sank down next to her. He felt empty, drained. And in that exact moment, the door burst open again. Alistair jumped up, his heart pounding, ready to fight again. But it was Dr. Evans. And she was not alone. She was with a man who looked exhausted, his hair a mess but his eyes bright and alert. Mr. Vance. Dr. Evans said, out of breath. This is Dr. Thorne. His jet just landed. He's here. He came. Alistair stared at the new doctor. You came. Your jet, Dr. Thorne said, his voice a quick, no-nonsense bark. It's very fast. Now I've read the file. It's bad. But there's one thing we can try. It's new. It's an ECMO treatment, but it's very aggressive. It's risky. But it's her only chance. Alistair looked from the doctor to the empty doorway where his mother had been, and then to his daughter. His world had been ripped apart and rebuilt in the span of 3 hours. He had just banished his past. He had to save his future. Do it, Alistair said, his voice clear, all the fog and pain gone. Do. Whatever it takes. Just save her. The next 12 hours were the longest of their lives. Dr. Thorne and his team worked. They moved Elena from the penthouse suite to the surgical ICU. The hospital was a hive of quiet, focused activity. Alistair and Lila. They just waited. They sat in the quiet, private room. The nurse brought them sandwiches they didn't eat. Alistair told Lila stories. Not fairy tales. Real stories. He told her about a girl with a laugh like sunshine who he met in college. He told her how that girl, Elena, had taught him how to dance in the rain. He told her about the small, simple ring he had bought. Lila told him about her mama. She told him about the wooden carvings. She told him how her mama would sing to her, a small, sad song, when she thought Lila was asleep. They weren't a billionaire and a poor girl. They were just a dad and a daughter, finding each other in the wreckage. Finally, as the first, weak, gray light of morning began to filter through the window, the door opened. It was Dr. Thorne. He had taken off his mask and his face was streaked with sweat. He looked exhausted. Alistair stood up. His legs were shaking. Lila ran and grabbed his hand. Dr. Thorne just looked at them. And then he smiled. A small, tired, beautiful smile. She's not out of the woods, he said, his voice a low, tired rasp. but her fever broke. The machine is breathing for her, but she is fighting. Her lungs, they're working. I think she's going to make it. Alistair's legs gave out. He didn't fall. He just sank. He sat down on the floor, put his head in his hands, and for the third time that day he cried. But this time Lila was crying too. And they were happy tears. 1 week later. The room was not gray. It was filled with sunlight. The windows looked out over the whole entire city. Elena was propped up on a mountain of soft, white pillows. She was still thin. She was still weak. But her hair was brushed and her cheeks, they had a faint, beautiful pink in them. Her eyes were open. And they were clear. She was looking at Lila, who was curled up in a big, soft chair, fast asleep, her small face peaceful. She was clutching a small, carved wooden bird. The door opened softly. Alistair walked in. He was holding a cup of coffee and a small burlap sack. "You're awake," he whispered, his heart so full it ached. "I'm awake," Elena whispered. Her voice was scratchy, but it was her. She wouldn't leave. The nurses, they tried to make her sleep in a bed, but she said she had to keep watch. "She's a good guard," Alistair said, smiling. He sat on the edge of the bed. He was so careful, so gentle, like she was the most precious, fragile thing in the world. He held up the burlap sack. "Lila, she told me about these." Elena's eyes filled with tears. Our little flowers." Alistair reached in and pulled one out. It was a small, simple, perfectly carved rose. She carved this one," Elena whispered. She was so proud of it. Alistair looked at the small wooden flower. Then he looked at Elena. "You were always so good with your hands," he whispered. I still have the little bird you carved for me. The one from our picnic." You kept it?" "I kept everything," he said, his voice thick. He put the flower down and took her hand. It was so thin, but it was warm. "Elena, I'm so sorry. For believing her. For not finding you. For 10 years. Elena put her other hand on top of his. "Alistair, she showed me the files. I knew she would ruin you. I did it to save you." "And you did," he said, his own tears falling onto their joined hands. You saved me, Elena. In every way. And now, it's my turn to save you." Elena looked at him, the man she had loved, the man she had run from. The father of her child. "Lila," she whispered. She has your eyes." "I know," Alistair said, his voice breaking. He leaned in, and after 10 long, cold, lonely years, he kissed her. It was a soft, gentle promise of a kiss. It was a kiss that said, "I'm home. You're safe. We're safe." Lila stirred in the chair. "Dad?" she mumbled, her eyes still closed. Is Mama awake?" Alistair and Elena looked at each other, tears streaming down both their faces, and for the first time in 10 years they both together laughed. A real true happy laugh. "Yes, my little bird," Alistair said, his voice full of joy. "Mama's awake." And so, the three of them, a family broken by lies and cruelty, finally began to heal. Alistair, Elena, and Lila left that hospital, and they never looked back. The giant, empty mansion on the hill wasn't cold anymore. It was filled with the sound of Lila's laughter. It was filled with the smell of Elena's cooking, as she got stronger and happier every day. And on the giant, marble fireplace, right next to the beautiful, smiling photograph of the girl in the yellow dress, sat a small burlap sack. It was overflowing with little wooden flowers and birds and sleeping cats. A reminder that even in the darkest, coldest winter, a little bit of love and a whole lot of courage is enough to bring back the sun. Thank you so much for watching our story. We are so happy you are part of our family. Please, if you love this story, show your support by liking this video and subscribing to our channel. It's the best way to help us grow and bring you more content that you'll love. And don't forget to scroll through our channel. We have so many other interesting stories just like this one waiting for you. We'll see you in the next story.